Welcome back to Laguna Seca, where we welcome you once again to the Rolex Monterey Motorsports reunion for 2024. But that is just the title. We are celebrating half a century of racing, and we get right back into the thick of it immediately with Formula One. And as we've said earlier, we are naming our groups this year for the first time after the memorable names, the men that have created history in their era. And of course, there is no greater legend than Andretti when it comes to American racing and Formula One. Only Phil Hill and Mario Andretti in 1978 won his title. And so this is, quite rightly, the Mario Andretti Trophy Race 1. And we've got a smorgasbord of cars from all the way through the 60s and 70s and early 80s. And alongside me, Scott Durnick, once again, back to the booth. And Dorsey Schrader, who's also here, and great to have both of you here to talk about this. First of all, before we get underway, we're still under pace. Your thoughts on just this event, Dorsey?
This is my 4th year straight running it here, and it's a wonderful event. It's a great racetrack with a lot of heritage, and it gets a good fan base out here, of course, with the car shows and all the things going on. We expect a really, really big crowd today, tomorrow.
Are they all behaving? Because we've just dragged you out of race control, which is rare, I may add.
No, they're not.
Well, let's hope these guys do. But some fantastic cars. And Scott, is there anyone particularly you want to pick out for our audience?
Well, they're all great cars. You'll see the first 5 or 6 cars are all ground effect cars,
yes,
or tunnel cars. The front Williams is a flat bottom car. Zach's car is a tunnel car, and a lot of downforce, great handling. All the cars, with the exception of Chris McAllister's, have the 3-liter Cosworth DFV, so power parity there. But John Dimmer driving the oldest car, the Tyrrell, and a lot of history in John's car, ex-Jackie Stewart. But you'll see them lining up. Now, they won't have passing until the exit of turn 4. So Cal is going to try to stay really close to Charlie and see what he can get done. And there might be some movement around in the backfield.
And Dorsey, we're expecting, you mentioned Cal Mika, but Cal Mika, Charles Nierenberg, this is going to be a challenge, isn't it? They love racing against each other.
They do, and they pick at each other's brain, and they ramp each other up. And they've been doing that since they've gotten here. And when they come off turn 4, it's on. I'll tell you.
And I'll tell you what, they're not holding back. We did have a crash yesterday, a mechanical issue, and thankfully everybody okay, but the car kind of destroyed. So it's the real deal, folks. These guys are pushing it to the limit. We obviously don't want any incident, but you can't avoid sometimes mechanical incidents happening. And we'll take you through some of the more famous cars.
Okay. Yeah, so Charlie Nierenberg's in the lead here, Meeker behind. They're quickly gapping the rest of the field. And it's important to realize the different eras of these cars. The Lotus that's in 4th place there is a Type 79. That was a World Championship car, ironically, with Andretti driving. And car currently belongs to Duncan Dayton, being driven by Mike Fitzgerald. But fantastic, certainly the class of the field in its day. It's interesting how these cars get a new life in vintage racing. The Tyrrell is a really good vintage car because there's been time to develop it and cure a lot of the mistakes.
Yeah.
In period, the teams had 1 week in between races, sometimes 2. Now we've got a lot of history and a lot of time, and the cars can have another competitive life.
Yeah, reading up on some of these cars, you see the line, a practice car or a test car that was used in X Grand Prix or this Grand Prix or this practice or qualifying. And so they really were kind of playing on the fly, testing on the fly, weren't they?
Absolutely, and there were some cars. Back then, they could actually run a different car in testing than in the race. And some teams even built qualifying cars that held a smaller amount of fuel and they were lighter in weight that they knew wouldn't go race distance. And I'm looking at the board here. I believe I misspoke. It's Chris Locke in 5th place, not the Type 79, Type 77. And Chris has been driving that car forever. He drives it very well.
He owns that car, doesn't he?
He does, absolutely. Yeah. He's owned it forever. Great pride of ownership. And Chris is a very safe, heads-up driver, quite competitive. Great guy to race against.
Martin Lauber, John Dimmer, these guys are all very equipped at driving these very, very skillful Formula One cars. And let's face it, these were, at the time, the top of their game, and it didn't take a fool to go out there and do this.
Chris Locke actually last week in the pre-reunion was involved in a pretty heavy crash down in turn 2, and it wasn't his fault. He got run over by a car from behind and broke a rear hub that fortunately he had back at home, so they had to rebuild the whole back of that car from last week into this. Nice to see it back out.
And Dorsey, you're obviously an American racer through and through, but was Formula One of interest to you growing up, and have you had a chance to do the historics?
Absolutely. It was one of my favorite things to watch. And in my era, my heroes were James Hunt, of course, and Jackie Stewart and Niki Lauda. And I was a product of wanting to be them.
Yeah, no kidding.
Weren't we all?
Yeah, I think that's what
Did you get to do historics, though?
No, I actually haven't driven one of these in historics, but I have done historics in several different venues.
Well, we've got some pretty star-studded cars out there. Zach Brown, of course, in Alan Jones's winning car that he owns from 1980, another Williams, as we see Nürburgring doing his bit. But we've also got a 1976 Ferrari that Niki Lauda drove. And in fact, it's the same spec, if you will, that he had his famous crash in and lost the championship to James Hunt in 76.
Cal Meeker pushing really hard right now.
Yeah, he is. He is. And you notice that if you look closely at Charlie's car, that car runs 15-inch front wheels, which was the spec in period. Williams had gone to larger wheels to get a little bit different front suspension geometry, and Charlie's really pushing hard. Cal knows that now is the time to strike, so he's going to be pushing quite hard. Like Charlie turned in a little early into turn 3.
Well, these two know each other in historic racing and have done for many years. I mean, when you consider that one is a world land speed record holder of old, and Cal Meeker, well, I see him every weekend in some sort of historic race.
Yep, looks like Charlie's fighting a little bit of handling balance here. Cal's car seems a little more planted than Charlie's does.
Cal's car actually a little loose off, but that's fast here at this racetrack. Charlie, I think, probably fighting a bit of understeer.
Yeah,
and
looks
that's
like
hard to deal with.
Yeah, well, the only thing to do is slow down. There's not much you can do.
And that's what I was about to say. It's hard to do when you've got somebody hounding you from the rears because the only way to get rid of it is to slow down some in the entry.
Griot and McAllister both in this one. They're currently 9th and 10th behind Dimmer at the moment. But let's just take you through what we've got. Out front, as you can see, the Williams WF07C from 1981. And we've also got
here comes
at Andretti, ironically.
Got to watch it down there.
Oh, and on the inside, gets defensive on the exit.
See, with the power parity these cars have, you really have to get them under braking, or set them up a couple corners ahead of time and get underneath somebody in a turn. But you know, the horsepower is quite similar between these cars, and they're both pushing the same amount of aerodynamic load.
And in vintage racing, car-to-car contact is totally prohibited.
Oh yeah.
And if they do that, then they're going to have to see me. I'm going to have to talk about it.
That's going to be a wait.
Yeah, it's going to be a while.
And now you have the beauty, of course, of the drone, so you can argue all you like because you can look at the replays as we take a look at another one of the big cars.
That was Locke again.
Chris Locke in that 76 Lotus 77.
He had his left rear completely taken off last week, so they did a lot of work between then and now.
Yep.
And luckily he had the one piece that they needed, which was only indigenous to that year chassis.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if you look at that car closely, it's quite interesting. It has multiple pickup points for all the suspension in the front. They were experimenting with different geometries, and it was really that car that laid the groundwork for the Type 79. The Type 79 is the optimized geometry of a 77 with, of course, ground effect.
Yeah, and, you know, again, you know, we've been talking about Mario Andretti, and a lot of people will give him the credit that he became almost the test guinea pig to help Colin Chapman develop that car, which he then won the 78 World Championship in.
That's a Shadow DN9 Martin Lauber's driving. This car is a tunnel car. It's got wings in the side, so it's got a little bit better aerodynamics than the Lotus 77 does in terms of downforce. And he's going to try and use it there in order to get around Chris.
Ironically, the car that took out Chris was also a Shadow.
That was
DN5.
a different Shadow, DN5 Alex Scott's car, yeah.
Yep.
Well, Americans haven't had a huge history of constructors, that is, in Formula One, but we do have a Shadow and a Penske out there. We have a Penske PC4 from '76.
Yeah, Penske's a really cool car. Those cars were built by the best fabricators.
I didn't realize Parnelli briefly had a race Formula One team,
They
and
did.
Mario drove it.
And that was also, when you look at the fabrication on the Parnell's car, that fantastic. Yeah.
Beautiful car.
Yeah. The PC4, I believe, was no longer a modified March. The original PC1 Penske's were modified Marches. By the time they got to the PC4, I think Penske was building the whole
It was a real car.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Ground up.
Well, we're looking at one of the Penske's now, one of the Marches right now, the Octavia Rinken 1982 March F1.
We were talking about the fact that this is an unusual amount of March cars. And March, of course, made a lot of cars in a lot of different classes, but you don't see a lot of Formula Ones at one place at one time.
No, you don't.
Yeah, well, the Marches, and I can say this as a March owner, the March is kind of the Ace Hardware supply store of Marches. They use Girling or
Robin Hood
AP calipers, a Hewland gearbox. They use the same upright design for many years. So as a private person owning a car, they're a little more accessible.
Yeah.
Certainly.
And we've both owned several Marches over our days.
Yeah.
It's nice, though, and that all those years could be adapted to upgrade in next year.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it was their demise, too, because when the ground effects came out,
they
were
were on
caught
their back
down.
foot.
Yeah, they
were
were.
on their back
Maybe
foot.
you can help me out. I'm reading just like about the 821, the March 821, but there's a difference between that and the F1. How do you? Because
Well, no, an 821, that means it's a 1982 Formula One. That's the
I got you.
nomenclature.
Okay.
So my car is a 741.
So you could call it an 821 or an F1.
That's
Doesn't matter.
correct.
Gotcha.
That's correct. Yep.
Ironically, that same chassis would be a 74B.
That's correct.
If it was an Atlantic or a Formula B, or a 74A. Same chassis, though.
Yep. Well, 74A would have been a 5,000 car.
Yeah.
That Formula A. Yeah.
Right.
Glad we got you on board, you guys. Thank you so much. We're listening to Dorsey, Schroeder, and Scott.
And Cal is
Dernick.
around Charlie.
And yes, we do have a new leader. Cal Mika hits the lead, but does he for long? Here comes Charlie. Side by side into Andretti.
Oh, easy, boys.
Yep. Got the race director here. He's getting nervous. What have you noticed, Scott? You look ponderous there.
Is that Charlie and Cal, or is that Dwight Matheson and Zach Brown?
Ah, good question. Well, that's a good point because, 27 is definitely Zach Brown. So this is the other battle, Yeah, this is
So
Matheson.
wait a minute, Charlie's dropped out.
Yep, you're right. Charlie
Meeker's
Meek,
in the
that's
lead.
what confused us. So this is the battle for
That's right.
third.
For third. So that's Dwight Matheson in another Tyrrell.
Yep.
And Zach Brown in an FW07 as well.
Dwight Madison, the 009 Tyrrell, 79.
Yeah, 009. 009.
Showing second, third place. So that's a great battle going on for second. And Meeker's gone. He's checked out.
And that Tyrrell that he's driving was driven originally by Didier Pironi, of course, and got a third at the US Grand Prix and multiple finishes in the points in era. Didier's primary car in 1979.
And Derek Daly got his first
right.
F1 drive, and he always complained that he was given a 2-year-old car for his first Formula One drive. And I said, well, Derek, they'd probably seen you drive before, so that's why.
He had quite a large crash in that car
he did.
as well.
Yeah, he's had plenty. Yeah.
Yes, he has.
Got a best finish of fourth in that car, did Derek Daly, in 1980. Yes, I remember the Candy sponsorship.
Dwight's doing a pretty good job of putting his car right where Zach wants to go.
Yep.
You can see they're both turning in early by how early they're tracking out. But, Zach doesn't have a lot of choice but to follow. So,
it says a lot about the fraternity that is motor racing. The CEO of a brand that you are competing against currently in Formula One, just doffing your cap to the greatness of the 1980 Alan Jones era of Williams and when they were right at the top of their game and top sponsors, top drivers, and it makes you think whether Williams can, as McLaren have, got back to the top. And I think it's just nice to see Zach Brown racing in an opposition car.
Well, Zach is broken just like all of us. He's just more successful.
It's amazing because I taught Zach Brown driving school at Skip Barber Racing back in probably early 80s. He was a very young man at the time.
Well, he was. I
we
heard
were all
earlier this
very
morning.
young men in the
Well, I
early
heard
80s.
earlier this morning he won a TV show and won $3,000
Yes.
to do the Skip Barber School.
Yep. And look where he is.
And look, Zach got him.
That's a good dice. Good dice going
I
on.
know. Another overtaken. Through he goes again. This is great racing.
And I think now we're going to see Zach will get Matheson because I think he's got more pace. And again, there's a perfect example. He waited. He watched what Matheson was doing.
Yep.
He knew where he was faster, and he exploited that opportunity, and now he's just going to pull away. As opposed to other forms of racing where the guy would muscle through on the second corner to see what happened.
And
You don't want to hurt the car.
Yeah, with clean air now, the
Williams is really going to be
the Williams
on
is
its
going to be
own.
strong with the tunnels in it.
Yep.
I wouldn't want to be doing Zach Brown's schedule because in the last month or so I've seen him let's say Spa. I saw him at the British Grand Prix for bikes for MotoGP, and of course he's been at Indy whenever he gets a chance. He's here this weekend. I mean, boy, what a schedule! And of course next week he'll be off to the Dutch Grand Prix.
And really, two guys who definitely deserve a little mention here. John Dimmer, that's an ex-Jackie Stewart car.
Yeah.
That car's got
First
single
time we've
pot
seen that.
brakes. It's a 1972 car, and irreplaceable. And John is driving the wheels off of it. That's chassis 002, and I've had the privilege of working on chassis 003 for a long time for John Delane. And wonderful cars. And the fact that he's keeping up.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking a
remarkable,
car that's 50-plus years old.
Yeah.
To us, that doesn't seem like us.
Yeah.
But my body can tell you otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
a
and-
works car in 1972.
Yeah, Chris McAllister also driving the Ferrari. One thing that people don't realize is the DFVs in these cars are engines they only dreamed of in 1978 or 79. They've been much more developed because there's 100 of these cars racing worldwide. The Ferrari engines are pretty much exactly the same as they were back then. They've not been developed at all. So Chris is down on power to the rest of the field. He's certainly got the most valuable car in the field, and yet he's right out there mixing it up. Chris McAllister in the ex-Lauda Ferrari.
Well,
Starter's giving them the white flag,
Yeah.
one to go.
Yep.
that's a sight you don't often see. Tyrrell going past the Ferrari at speed as Mika.
That's the Meeker lapping him. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only car I haven't seen, and I don't know if we'll see it this weekend, but it had hoped to run, and that was the Honda RA272 that Takuma Sato, the Honda driver, of course, was going to drive. So.
I think they decided they're just going to do demo laps
That'd be good.
with that car. As I say, it's a 1966 car. Even with Takuma Sato driving,
It's
would
not
be
gonna
20
hold its
plus
own to
seconds
that,
a
yeah.
lap slower than this car.
Now
He's get-
Meeker being
no.
very
He's getting
cautious.
into traffic now, yeah.
No, Meeker's got a problem.
think?
Meeker's slowed.
Oh.
Meeker's got a problem.
Oh, Zach Brown won't hesitate.
He will not. No, sir.
He loves to mix it with
Meeker
these boys.
definitely slowed, or he had a moment, one or the other.
One
But-
of the two. Whoa, and that was a
whoa,
bigger
whoa,
moment
touch.
than it needed to be.
Oh, that was all Meeker's fault. That was all Meeker's fault.
Like, that's your opinion? Let's
Yeah, what do you think?
Dorsey?
Well, he didn't back into him.
Yeah, he didn't bang into him. I mean, he hit.
That's a good point.
He hit the right rear of the Tyrrell with his left front. I mean, that's pretty indefensible. And Meeker was way high. Cal is such a heads-up guy and such a good driver. It's
Oh,
surprising.
he'll be kicking himself.
Oh, he'll be livid. Yeah,
That's going to give Zach Brown the win, isn't
It
it?
looks
That
like
is.
it, yeah.
That is crazy.
I'm just trying to see if he's come out of the corner yet. But
But maybe Cal will get across the line first. I don't know.
let's see how far he was ahead. Let's see. Here he comes. He just crawls along, and he does take the checkered flag.
Oh, he
so
does take
he
the
still
flag.
does take
Good.
it.
Good job.
But
Good
I
job.
think he did have some sort of problem, though.
He
that
did.
He was
No,
dealing with.
he
and I
had, he
think
had a problem, and I think that
was probably
contributed
looking
to,
down,
to
yeah.
the contact.
You know, he caught up with the back of the pack, and then looked like he was blending his way through, and then all of a sudden lost momentum, and it just
Right, Cal Meeker really slowed, and then Dimmer went by him again.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know about you, but it looked like Dimmer was right on his line, and Cal was trying to go high.
he might have had a puncture. You know, he could have had
Yeah.
a front tire going down and lock up that tire.
Sure.
You know, easily have a mechanical issue.
Sure.
Well, we've had a perfect insight here with Dorsey Trade at the race director, or at least somebody who's put in charge of making sure that these go or run as well as we can to time, because it's not an easy thing to do at all. These guys all love to race, but they are very careful, generally speaking. So, but yeah, great race for Zach Brown then in the 27.
Yep.
A World Championship winning Alan Jones car.
I can tell you, I don't think it's such a good idea to have Dorsey up here watching these screens.
No, he's taking
At
notes.
least during my race. I don't know that I want that.
Well, or I could keep him here and distract him.
Yeah. No. He sees everything. That's
Sure,
the problem.
It sure makes my my day go by easier.
So I can confirm Cal Mika, Zach Brown, and Dwight Matheson are your top three. Martin Lauber taking fourth place. Octavio Rincon in fifth. John Dimmer in sixth. Let's head down once again to Kev in the paddock.